Crime and Crime Again discusses true crime content that may be graphic or disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. The Montana Department of Justice conducted a research study in 2020 to further examine the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Montana has consistently appeared to be an epicenter of this crisis. According to the most recent United States Census, the population of Montana was 1,068,778. Indigenous people make up 6.6% of that population, yet account for 26% of all missing persons reports in the state of Montana, as opposed to Montana's white population, which makes up 89% of the total population and 68% of missing persons reports in the state. This means that Indigenous people are 4 times more likely to go missing than white people. As of June 2020, Indigenous people were the subjects of 33% of all active missing persons reports in the state of Montana. The study also analyzed the results of autopsies conducted on recovered missing people from 2017 to 2019. 45% of those were declared accidental, and a staggering 21% were declared undetermined. When we look at cases of Indigenous people, there is a glaring pattern of medical examiners and other investigating authorities determining the deaths of Indigenous people to be inconclusive, or to be written off as exposure or hypothermia, despite abundant evidence that has extreme potential to point to a cause of death that is not accidental or natural at all. When we take a close look at the missing persons reports from each of the 8 federally recognized tribes in Montana, this devastating pattern becomes even more clear. The study examined missing persons data from the Blackfeet, Crow, Flathead, Fort Peck, Northern Cheyenne, and Rocky Boy reservations. From 2017 to 2019, the Northern Cheyenne reservation saw the most significant uptick in missing persons reports, going from 5 missing people in both 2017 and 2018 to 37 in 2019. Out of all 6 of these reservations, the Crow Reservation had the highest number of missing people each year: 26 in 2017, 24 in 2018, and 37 in 2019. Though Yellowstone County saw the most missing persons reports from 2017 to 2019, it's Bighorn County that had the highest number of missing people per capita in that same time period. The Montana county with the second highest rate of missing people per capita is Rosebud County, largely comprised of the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. Rosebud County is the 4th largest county in the state, though it's one of the least populated at just over 9,300. The town of Lame Deer sits at the south edge of the county, bordering Bighorn County. Lame Deer was named after a Lakota chief of the same name, who was killed by the United States Army in 1877, just south of where the town sits today. Lame Deer was the home of 14-year-old Henny Scott, a freshman at Lame Deer High School. Henny lived with her family on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. Henny spent much of her early life in Montana, until her family moved to the tiny town of Elroy, Texas, just 20 minutes south of Austin. The family had relocated there to help care for Henny's grandfather, whose health was declining. In October 2013, her grandfather passed away. The family remained in Elroy for a time, and while in elementary school, Henny joined a cheer camp, and was soon cheering at local games and performing during halftime with a cheer squad. Tragically, the family lost Henny's older brother in October 2014, and soon after they relocated back to Lame Deer, Montana. In middle school, Henny started attending the school's basketball games, which she loved. It was at that time that she developed an interest in playing basketball herself. In 8th grade, she joined her school's basketball team, and she had plans to continue playing during her freshman year of high school. Based on her family's descriptions of her, Henny was an effervescent, tender soul with a wonderful sense of humor. She was always laughing and was always making people laugh. She had dreams of someday becoming a doctor. On December 7th, 2018, Henny called her mom, Paula Castro, to ask if she could attend her school's basketball tournament in Billings, an hour and a half away from her home in Lame Deer. Paula told her daughter that she couldn't go because she was still grounded, and that she just needed to come home instead. Henny replied, "Okay, Mom, I'll be home in a bit." That was the very last time Paula spoke to her daughter. In an interview with a podcast called Vanished, a Native American Epidemic, Paula and her husband, Nathan Stopps, said that it wasn't uncommon for Henny to spend a couple of days away from home. She was incredibly outgoing, and she had a large social circle. She was a 14-year-old girl. She enjoyed spending time with her friends. But Henny never left home for more than 2 to 3 days at a time, and even then, her parents never had any trouble contacting her or finding her. This time was different. When her family started asking around about whether anyone had seen Henny, they learned that the last time anyone saw her was on December 8, 2018. She was walking away from a house in an area known as Muddy Creek, near the western portion of Lame Deer. Her parents were also aware that Henny had been at a house party the night that she called her mother to ask about the basketball game, and that Henny had been drinking at this party. After a few days, the family became troubled and afraid. Henny had never disappeared like this. Paula and Nathan made the decision to visit the Bureau of Indian Affairs and report their daughter missing. They were not taken seriously. Rather than jumping into action to find a missing child, authorities instead allowed Henny's files to sit untouched on a desk, claiming that whoever was supposed to have been dealing with the paperwork was away on vacation. No other officers or agents took the responsibility or initiative to handle Henny's case files themselves. Upon reporting their daughter missing, Paula and Nathan were asked if they had simply checked with Henny's friends, or if she possibly had a new boyfriend, implying that she had impulsively run away with a new love interest. Her parents had in fact spoken with everyone they could think of that might have had knowledge of Henny's whereabouts. They stood in the BIA office pleading for help in finding their daughter because they had already exhausted every theory they had, but they were dismissed, ignored, and disrespected. The family was left to search for Henny on their own. There is no indication that authorities offered any effort or resources to the search. During their search efforts, Nathan says that he went to the house where Henny was last seen, hoping to find out more about that night. According to Nathan, the men at this house were evasive. They refused to offer up any information about the night Henny was last seen walking away from their home. Authorities did not issue a missing person advisory for Henny Scott until December 26, 2018, almost 3 weeks after Henny was last seen and more than 2 weeks after she was reported missing. In the advisory, authorities provided basic information, such as Henny's appearance, age, and where she was last suspected to have been seen. The advisory also stated that she may have had at least one physical injury of some sort, but did not offer any context as to why authorities may have suspected this. Henny's family organized searches with volunteers to comb the area for any sign of their daughter. On December 28, 2018, searchers found the body of Henny Scott, only 200 yards away from the house where she was last seen. She was covered in snow, and her parents have stated that there were several noticeable physical injuries on her body. The FBI would later tell the family that there were no visible injuries on Henny's body, despite the missing persons advisory clearly indicating that there was reason to believe Henny was possibly injured. Not only that, but Henny's parents had seen her body, and they are adamant that Henny had sustained obvious injuries. In the interview with the Vanished, a Native American Epidemic podcast, Paula says that Henny was found wearing someone else's clothing. An autopsy was conducted at St. Vincent Healthcare's morgue in Billings, Montana, presumably by Yellowstone County Coroner Cliff Mahoney. However, for reasons unknown, the results of that autopsy were released to the public by Bighorn County Coroner Terry Bullis. There has never been any explanation as to why Henny's autopsy was conducted in Yellowstone County, but the results were released to and publicized by a coroner in another county. Terry Bullis released the results of Henny's autopsy to the Billings Gazette, a local news publication, before her family had been informed of the results. Bullis claimed that this was because he didn't have the jurisdiction to communicate the autopsy results to Henny's family. Henny Scott's cause of death was determined to be hypothermia, and the manner of death was ruled an accident. Some of Henny's belongings remained in the house where she was last seen for some time, including her winter jacket, a pair of cutoffs, and possibly a pair of socks. The people living in the house never offered to return the belongings to Henny's family. Paula and Nathan had to call for the assistance of police to retrieve the items from the house. The BIA called in the FBI to assist in the investigation into Henny's death. However, authorities had very little communication with the family. In fact, the FBI only personally approached Henny's parents on one occasion, to ask for their signature on a release form that would allow the FBI to access Henny's social media accounts. After what authorities claimed to be a thorough investigation, on August 22, 2019, the District of Montana U.S. Attorney's Office announced that they would not be pursuing federal charges in the death of Henny Scott. In the statement, U.S. Attorney Kurt Alme stated that the FBI and the BIA had determined that they, quote, cannot prove that any federal crime was committed, end quote. Alme goes on to say, quote, the forensic examination did not find any significant trauma or pre-existing disease, end quote. Again, this directly contradicts what Henny's parents saw with their own eyes, and the implication made in her missing person advisory that she likely did have a physical injury of some sort. The U.S. Attorney's statement reiterates that an autopsy determined Henny's cause of death to have been hypothermia, and that the manner of death was classified as accidental. It also states, quote, the forensic examination also showed that alcohol use was a significant condition of her death, end quote. While it is known that Henny did partake in drinking alcohol, she was 14 years old. Someone provided her with alcohol. Someone was with her while she consumed that alcohol. There were several people that Henny's parents are aware of who were at that house, at a party, the night that Henny was there. It was apparently the same night that she had called to ask her mother if she could go to a basketball tournament in Billings. Paula stated that Henny was wearing someone else's clothing when she was found, and that her winter jacket was left inside the house. Henny was found only 200 yards away from that house. She was a healthy, athletic young girl who had lived in Montana for much of her life. She knew how cold it could get. She knew how to dress for the weather. Henny did not simply wander outside in freezing weather with inadequate clothing. If she did wander out into the night without warm clothing, she would have been severely impaired. And how would that have happened? Because someone provided her with whatever she was consuming. Another unsettling possibility is that something happened in that house, and Henny was taken outside and placed where she was found. Or perhaps a fight or altercation was occurring. Things moved outside, and that's where something awful happened to Henny. Again, Paula and Nathan saw injuries on their daughter's body. Someone gave that 14-year-old girl the alcohol she was drinking. Someone knows where she was for almost 3 weeks when she was missing. Someone knows exactly what happened, and exactly how she got to that spot 200 yards away from the house. Many people in the community hold the firm opinion that the investigation into Henny's death by the FBI and BIA was not thorough at all, and I very much agree. If you enjoy the show, please do consider leaving a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, as it really helps out with the visibility of the show. If you don't listen on Apple Podcasts but you would still like to leave a review, you can do that on Podchaser by searching Crime and Crime Again. I will also link it in the show notes. If you'd like to show monetary support for the show, you can do so on Buy Me a Coffee, where you can make a one-time donation less than the price of 1 cup of coffee. I will also leave that link in the show notes. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Crime Again Pod, Instagram at Crime Again Podcast, on Facebook, Crime and Crime Again Podcast, and on TikTok at Crime Again Podcast. There is also a Facebook discussion group, which I will link in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of Crime and Crime Again.